Good morning, everyone. Welcome to our International Philosophy Conference. Before we begin our program, let us take this time to register into this event live through an online registration to be led by Ma'am Rona Makalang. A virtual round of applause, please.
Good morning. We encourage everyone to fill in the registration form link, which was already posted in the comment section. There will also be an evaluation form after each session. So please make sure to fill it out because it will be the basis for the giving of your certificate of participation. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ma'am Rona. In a few minutes, we will be starting our event, so please do register now as soon as possible before we start our event. Thank you, and sit back and relax.
To see, I long to go back soon to sweet Bukidnon. Distant land to see, memories to me, the home I long to see. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, under blue starry skies, where love and joy never die. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, under blue starry skies, where love and joy never die. Wherever I may roam, the distant land to see, I long to go back soon to sweet Bukidnon home, where lovely mountains high, with forests tall and grand, bring memories to me, the home I long to see. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, under blue starry skies, where love and joy never die. There my heart yearns to be, far away, Bukidnon land, under blue starry skies, where love and joy never die.
Good day, everyone. To start our program, we will be commencing our invocation followed by the singing of the national anthem and buksu hymn through video presentation.
Kayang magiliw, telas ng sinakanan, alam ng puso, sa dibdib mo'y buhay. Lupang hinirang, tuyag ka ng magiting, sa manlulupin, di ka pasisingil, sa nagatak tutok sa simoy at sa langit mong bangaw, ay hinatang tula, kawin sa pagkayang minamahal. Ang isang ng patawad mo'y tagumpay na nag-iindig, ang bituin at araw niya kailan pang ay di magdidinig. Luman ang araw ng walhagit pagsingkaw, buhay langit sa piling mo. Ang inigaya na pagkay mga amin, ang mamatay ng dahil sa'yo.
Sa ngalan sa Amahan, ug sa Anak, ug sa Espiritu Santo. Amen. Amahan nga makagahom, angayan kang daygon ug pasalamatan. Ikaw ang tinubdan sa kinabuhi, gugma kalinaw ug kalipay. Salamat sa imong mga gasa sa amo sa matag adlaw.
Amahana mo nga langit nun, kami nga mga katawhan magkasasala, busa pasayloa kami sa mga sala.
وقال ربكم ادعوني أستجب لكم اللهم إننا نسألك برحمتك ونورك الذي أنعمت علينا بالإيمان وصحة الأجساد برحمتك يا أرحم الراحمين ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار والحمد لله رب العالمين.
Padayon kaming nagyukbo diha sa imong presensya, nga unta ipadala nimo karon adlaw ang imong proteksyon ug giya, aron padayon namong mabuhat ang mga tahas nga imong gihatag, alang sa imong dungog ug giya, ug alang sa kaayuhan sa usag isa.
The mountains under blue of Bukidnon skies, they will lay like the sharks, they will lay like the sharks. In the midst of Bukidnon mountains under blue of Bukidnon skies, they will lay like the shining beacon up to minds that are born to rise. In this land of resplendent gold trees, lay a history of great light. They are stories of free-born eagles beyond the reach of Kitawlan heights. Bukidnon State University, you're a steadfast keeper of my memories. Bukidnon State University, you're a bearer of great possibilities. You stand tall like the lofty pine trees in the heart of an You're a cradle of Bukidnon children, teach them truth and the love for life. Minds like breeze springing after soft rays, like true artists knowing full in mind. Your witness to life's unfolding, speak of visions that become alive. Like sunflower reaching for a bright star, God's rays never into man. Bukidnon State University, you're a steadfast keeper of my memories. Bukidnon State University, you're a bearer of great possibilities. You stand tall like the lofty pine trees, braving winds and the cheerless night. Bukidnon State University.
To our fellow Buksuans, esteemed faculty and guests, welcome to the International Philosophy Conference. It is with great privilege and honor to have you all here today.
That's right, partner. I know we're all excited to be here today as we are about to be enlightened by the knowledge and wisdom waiting for us coming from our esteemed guest speakers.
Yes, partner, I am excited as you are. But before that, let us first introduce ourselves to our viewers and guests. I am Eric Rowan Regalado.
And I am Lady Crisville Balisi, your Masters of Ceremony. To start off, let us hear an inspiring message from our ever-dynamic chairperson here at Buksu's Philosophy Department. For his opening remarks, please give a virtual round of applause to Mr. Christian Inovejas.
Hello, am I audible? Okay. Maayad haaldaw inyo alan. Good day, everyone. Distinguished guest speakers, esteemed participants, fellow scholars, dear students. It is my great honor and privilege to welcome you all to the International Philosophy Conference hosted by Bukidnon State University. Today, we convene virtually to engage in profound discussions on the teaching of philosophy and philosophical research. This conference brings together scholars, educators, students from various corners of the country and the world, united by our shared passion for philosophical inquiry. I'd like to express my deepest gratitude to our two distinguished guest speakers, Dr. Capili and Professor Diedrich, who have joined us for this conference. Your willingness to share your expertise and insights with us is truly appreciated, and we are excited to hear your valuable contributions to our discussions today. To all our participants, thank you for your enthusiasm and commitment to this event. Your presence signals our dedication to the continuous growth and development of philosophy, particularly in the areas of pedagogy and research. We hope that today's presentations and exchanges will serve as catalysts for deeper thought, collaboration, and innovation in our field. In addition to today's discussion, I am eager to announce that at the end of this conference, we will be launching a new organization, the Philosophy Society of Bukidnon Incorporated. This society will serve as a platform to further promote the study and teaching of philosophy within Bukidnon and beyond. It will bring together philosophers and scholars who are passionate about advancing philosophical dialogue and fostering a community that values deep critical thinking. We look forward to your continued involvement and support in this exciting new venture. Although we may be separated by physical distance, our connection to this conference exemplifies the global nature of philosophical inquiry. Together, let us embrace this opportunity to learn, grow, and expand the horizons of our understanding. Once again, I extend my heartfelt thanks to our speakers, participants, organizers, and students. May this conference be a fruitful and intellectually stimulating experience for all. Welcome and let the discussions begin. Salamat tungkay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sean, Sir Christian, for this inspiring message. I'm sure our fellow conceptual engineers and guests have something to take home from our dear chairperson.
Now it
Now it
is
is
time
time
for
for
us
us
to
to
be
be
enlightened
enlightened as we head to the main part of our program. Are you all excited?
Yes, I'm pretty sure that we are all excited to hear from our guest speakers this morning. Let's not make them wait any longer, partner. At this juncture, we would like to give the digital floor to one of our esteemed faculty, Mr. Joe Fermanina, to introduce to us our guest speakers and the rationale of this conference. A virtual round of applause, please.
Okay. Hello. Good morning, everyone. First and foremost, I would like to thank everyone for coming here in this conference, and of course, especially to our chair also, who has ever supported this endeavor of us in promoting philosophy, not just in our university, but also around Bukidnon or perhaps around the Philippines and the world. As you can see, we have started this conference earlier. We started at 8 o'clock. We started receiving registrations from students, philosophy enthusiasts. We also receive registrations from different faculty, not only from Bukidnon State University, but also from other universities here in Bukidnon, as well as outside Bukidnon. We also receive registrations from uh, other regions and around the Philippines. No, and we'd like to thank you for registering. This is our first ever conference, doing it live here virtually, and um, later on, as you engage with the speakers, we encourage everyone to share their questions. You may post your questions here in the comment section of YouTube, and the speakers will just select your questions. No? And of course, the speakers are going to respond to your questions, especially if these questions are related to what they're going to speak about. Later on, you will hear them. The first speaker will be talking about philosophy research and publication, and later on, in the afternoon session, of which we are also inviting you to attend. We'll also be responding to questions about teaching philosophy. Now, I am trying to see if our speaker is already here so that I can introduce him to you. Now, let me say something about the first speaker for this session of ours. Um, our first speaker, Dr. April Capili, uh, will be the first speaker in the morning session of this Buksu Philosophy Department's International Philosophy Conference. He currently teaches philosophy and history at École Européenne Brussels 4, or the European School of Brussels 4, and he obtained his doctorate in philosophy at the Catholic University of Leuven in Belgium, or the Catholic University of Leuven, and he will be lecturing on philosophy, research, and publication. Now, without further ado, let me present to you our speaker for this morning session. And while waiting, let me now give the floor to uh, the MCs. Okay, thank you very much and good morning.
Okay, so as we wait for our guest speaker to come on live, so I would like to ask a few of our guests here what their expectations are for this morning's event. So please comment on our comment section what you have in mind so that we may also be enlightened by your thoughts. Sige daw be, mangita daw taog sa tsada nga comments dire. Aside sa mga good morning, do you have anything else to do you have anything to share? Especially today is what is today? Today is September 11. At the same time, it is also it is suicide prevention month. So what do you have? What do you guys have to say with that? What about you, lady? Have you encountered Albert Camus? Wala pa may existentialism.
Not existentialism, but we've already discussed through Sartre.
Ah, okay, Sartre. Essentially, regarding suicide prevention month, one of the things that Camus states in his philosophy of absurdism is that uh, one of the ways to escape absurdism is through philosophical suicide and physical suicide. But he also suggests that one of the greatest way for us uh, to essentially cope up with the absurd is through absurdism, which is to accept that life is inherently meaningless. Yes, suicide is bad, according to one comment here by Mr. Mercury. So going back, one of the quotes by Albert Camus was, "In the end, it requires courage to continue living than to kill yourself." So, uh, as we are still here, alive and well, it's good to see a lot of courageous people still going on, still living their life despite all of the absurdities that we may have encountered or all of the troubles and trials that we are encountering. Sige daw, be. Si Mercury, nandiyo ang interesting diri og kuan ay comment. What about the others? Say something. According by Mr. Sire Earl Baal, suicide was caused by self-discouragements. This is quite enlightening. Perhaps you may want to enlighten us regarding this one. But we could also see that one of the things that causes suicide is, uh, yeah, self discouragements, being disappointed, and having a lot of expectations towards yourself, and also to consider the expectations of other people's upon yourself. One of the things that would contribute to self discouragements. So how do we reconcile self discouragement and, essentially wanting to live? Suicide does not solve the problem of meaninglessness anymore, according by Mr. Mercury. See, suicide does not solve the problem of meaninglessness any more than living does. That's actually very, very enlightening. To add on to Mr. Mercury, to uh, to essentially cope up with meaninglessness, it is to actually live through it, going through the unknown, and being able to keep doing what we do best despite our hurdles. Okay, so once again, let us please welcome our guest speaker, Dr. April Capili, for his lecture. A virtual round of applause, please.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. It's a real pleasure for me to be here. Thanks for inviting me. I hope you can all hear me. Um, Now, at the moment, I think they are they're doing their best to share the presentation that I have. So I hope you can see that. I don't like putting it in presentation view, so I'll just do this. I'll just make that bigger. Okay, I think it's working now. Is that okay?
Yes, sir, that's okay. Uh,
Okay, thanks. Okay, so I'll start. It, is that okay?
We would like to request your camera, sir, so that we could also see you, sir.
At the moment it's on. I see myself. Um, I don't know why. Let me see. Website for now. Maybe you can see me now because I see myself.
Okay, sir, we can now see you and your
All right.
presentation as well.
Thank you. Great. Thanks. Okay. May I begin? Is that okay?
You can now begin, sir.
Okay. Good. Thanks. Again, thanks for inviting me. It's a real pleasure and honor for me to be here. Thanks to Sir Jofer for reaching out, and I was happy to hear that such an event was being organized at your university. I'm sorry to say I've never been there, but I would love to. So at the very least, this is a chance to connect with you. Here's my presentation. I'm sure you can see it now. Again, thanks for your patience. Let me just say a few words about myself. This is my academic background. So as you can see, um, I've studied philosophy for a very long time. I started in the Philippines um, at Adamson University and St. Vincent Seminary in Quezon City. And then later on, I did a master's in Ateneo de Manila. And that gave me the chance to come to Belgium, where I am now. And then after many years, um, I took a break from philosophy and decided to pursue another passion of mine, which is literature. So I studied again. And now I'm currently teaching in Belgium, but I'm also teaching history. So I thought I should actually get formal education in history. That's what I'm doing. I'm pursuing an online master's with the University of Edinburgh. So that's a little bit, that's a kind of additional load on me and on my work, but I enjoy it. So I'm happy to be doing that. And like I said, I live in Belgium, and I teach at a high school, at a secondary school in Belgium. It's a European school. I teach different subjects. I teach philosophy and history. By the way, this is not a picture of the school. This is just a picture of the square in Brussels. But that's what I've been doing the past 7, 8 years. And here, this is just to give you an idea of the kind of writing and research that I've done over the years. As you can see, I started publishing quite early, maybe a few years after starting or a year or two after starting my MA in Ateneo. So that's one of my course papers that I revised several times, and fortunately it was good enough to be published. I'm referring to this one. And then, over the years, I continued to do research and to write. So I have some publications in philosophy, eventually some publications in the field of literature. I used to do research on the Irish writer James Joyce, and attended a few conferences about his work. One of my recent publications was about doing philosophy with children, PWC or P4C, and then this paper, I was fortunate enough to publish it in Budhi. That's an international journal, but it's really based in the Philippines. And I've also created learning scenarios as a history teacher. You can also find them online. Those are learning scenarios, like teaching materials for anyone who might be dealing with the same topics. So in this particular instance, it's about the First World War, which is something that I teach. And so that's also available online, like I said. And I'm sure the organizers behind this international conference will be happy to share the presentation that I have. So if you want to find those research papers and learning scenario, you can find them online as well. Some of them still exist and are accessible. And recently it's because I've been writing poetry for a long time, but it's only recently that I've gathered enough courage to try to have them published. So this small magazine, literary magazine in the US, will publish a couple of my poems this month. So I'm very happy about that as well. So that's another project I'm working on. I've been doing some creative writing, and hopefully I'll hear some good news soon and have other works of mine published. Now, let me get to this overview of the talk that I'm presenting, and the topics I'm going to discuss with you today. So I was asked to talk about how to write a research paper in philosophy. And so I wanted to prepare something that was fundamental and also very useful if you're an undergraduate or a graduate student in philosophy. So these are the things that we're going to talk about today. What is a research paper? What are the parts of a paper? What do I need to do and keep in mind before I start, conducting my research? And then what are the component parts of a paper and what are their natures? So what do I need to understand about those things? Like, what is a research problem? What is a thesis, like in a paper, a main claim? And then how do you support your thesis? And then towards the end, how do you actually conduct research? How do you do that? And I'll also give you some tips about how to get your paper published. Like, how do you try? What are the things that you need to do to be aware of? And how do you go about placing your paper in a decent publication? Okay. So at the moment, by the way, I'm looking at my presentation. So if there are any questions, just give me a sign and I'll entertain your comment or question. So just let me know, please. You can interrupt, you can speak up. And if the organizers see any comments that are worth mentioning at any point, please let me know. I'd be happy to address any comment or question. So don't be shy, don't be afraid to intervene, to interrupt. Okay. So let's start with this. What is a research paper? Now, it's important to understand that the research paper is something that you write. It's a text, and it makes a claim. So it says, this is true. This statement is true. Okay? And that claim is supported by and also developed, elaborated through argumentation. I'll give you examples later on. Okay? This is just a starting point. So a research paper is an essay, basically. It says that something is true. It makes a main claim, and that claim is supported by argumentation. But it's not only that, the claim is also based on research. And in this particular instance, because we're in the field of philosophy, so research means you have to rely on primary sources and secondary sources. You've probably heard about these terms already, but just to clarify, primary sources are those texts that are written by established philosophers, the big names, Kant, Descartes, Locke, Rousseau, Simone de Beauvoir, people like them. And then secondary sources, those are texts that are written by also philosophy teachers, philosophy professors, practitioners, but they may not be, their names may not be as big as the traditional canonical philosophers that we study in our classes. So most of these secondary sources are introductory, they're introductions, they're commentaries, they can be journal articles, they can be research articles. But we have that basic distinction in philosophy with regard to primary sources and secondary sources. And then all of these things, your claim, your argumentation, your support for the claim, they're all presented in an ordered, logical manner, usually in paragraphs. Okay? And then at the end of the paper, you have a conclusion where you summarize and affirm your findings, all of the things that you tried to prove, so to speak, in your paper. Okay? But for our purposes, what's important here to understand, to remember, is that a research paper really makes a claim, and it provides an argument. Okay? Now, to get into a little bit more detail, I'm sure you've seen this somewhere, maybe in an English class, maybe in an introduction to philosophy class. Okay, these are also basic things, fundamental things that most of you probably already know, but it's good to come back to them and talk about them, like in this particular context. And these are the parts of a research paper. So please focus on the items that you see on the left-hand side first, okay? Also my left-hand side. So the first part of a paper, any paper, can be broken down into three parts. And the first part is the introduction. Usually that's short, maybe it's 1, 2, maximum 3 paragraphs. Okay. And the introduction, the introductory paragraph has some components that are really important that need to be there. Okay. So the first sentence is usually the hook, HOOK. And that's really, it should be one of the most interesting sentences in your paper. Okay. Because with the hook, you're trying to pull the reader in, you're trying to convince the reader, okay, this paper is worth reading, I want you to stay with me. So that opening line has to be very interesting. But it's not only interesting, it it also has other functions. It can also help contextualize the problem you're dealing with. Okay? Or you're setting up the problem with the help of that opening statement, whatever that is, whatever you say. Okay, so try to make that first line one of the most, if not the most interesting, the most engaging, the most captivating line in your paper. Okay, the introduction also contains the research question. I'll explain what that is later. The research question, so this is a statement of your problem, then it can also contain the thesis, your main claim, what you're, in the end, what your paper is really saying. And I suggest, not all papers have this, but I suggest that you also have an outline of steps. So you tell the reader this, what I'm going to do. After this, I'm going to do that other thing. And then after the second item or the second point, I'll make a third one. So just give a brief outline of steps or outline of the arguments that you're going to make. And then towards the end of your introduction, I suggest that you hint at the conclusion, hint at your solution to the problem. So you don't have to say explicitly how you're going to conclude the paper right away. You don't have to say everything because otherwise your reader will stop reading. You just give a hint. So again, when you're writing a paper or any, it can be in philosophy or it can be a paper for other subjects, it's good to keep these things in mind so that you keep the reader as engaged as possible because you want them to keep on reading, okay, until the very end. And then the second part of any paper is the body. I know this sounds very basic, but it's good to, again, to have a look at these things. The body is obviously more detailed, it's longer, and it provides you with a lot of new information. Okay? The body will contain your lines of argumentation, all the arguments that you're going to make, all the evidence you're going to provide in your paper. So all of the citations, all of the quotations that you got from your primary and secondary sources, and then you're going to present those things in the body of the paper. And then lastly, you have your conclusion. Now, the conclusion is also short. Okay, it should be as short as the introduction, or at the very least, not as long as the body. Okay, has to be short. In your conclusion, in your concluding paragraph or paragraphs, you shouldn't provide any new argument, any new information. Okay, but you can say certain things that you've already said in the body in a new language, in a new way, is what I mean. Okay? By new language, I mean you say it differently. You already said it in the body, but you want to say it differently. Okay? So the conclusion can include a recapitulation of the problem, a summary of all of the arguments that you made, or at least the main arguments, a summary of your findings, and then you make a final statement. That statement, as much as possible, has to be a strong statement. By the way, other people would suggest, especially if you're writing a longer work like a thesis or a dissertation, some people would say you should include in the conclusion ways of doing further research. Okay, some people do that. Okay, but I suggest that for shorter works, like shorter research papers of about 4,000 to 6,000 words, you know, I suggest that your paper has to be self-contained. You can make an allusion or reference to possible further research, but it cannot be that well developed. It cannot be fully developed, obviously, because your paper is shorter. Okay? And so I learned from one of my good teachers in the past, my research and philosophy teacher, that the parts of a paper can also be understood like this. So if you would, please focus on the right-hand side of the presentation. So in the introduction, you're really making a promise. You know, you're saying, this is the problem I'm going to deal with. This is going to be my claim. This is what I'll do to support my claim. And if you follow me, you'll see this thing. Excuse me. You'll see this topic or this question the same way I do. Okay? So in the first part, in the introduction, you're making a promise. In the body, you're actually fulfilling that promise, right? So you're going to say, you see, the claim I've been making, this is supported by, this is demonstrated by the following pieces of evidence. These things that I found in the primary and the secondary texts, okay? And then the conclusion is simply affirming that you fulfilled that promise, okay? So you're just going to say, "Oh, I did that in the body. I already did that. You saw that. Okay, you saw the problem. My claim responded to my main claim. My thesis responded to the problem that I introduced, and you also saw the textual support that I found that I laid out, and so we can conclude, therefore, that this is the case." Okay, so this is a simple way of understanding a paper in its entirety and the different parts of a paper. Okay, I hope that's helpful. Let me just check if there are comments or questions, just in case. Okay, none so far. Maybe I'll make this a little bit bigger. Now I'll give you just glimpses of parts of a paper, the last philosophy paper that I published in 2021, I think. As you can see here, you have the first page usually contains the title. For instance, is it desirable to do philosophy with students in their second language? Okay. And if you are going to have your paper published, usually at the beginning of your paper, you'll have an abstract. Okay, so let's take another look. So you have the title, you have the name of the author, and your institutional affiliation. At that point, I was still teaching online with Ateneo de Manila. And so those are the basic elements of a published paper. And you can also, if you're writing a research paper for a course, you can ask your teacher what the requirements are, because it might be slightly different than this. Some teachers like having a heading here on the top left-hand side. But if you're publishing your paper and it appears in a journal, it will look something like this. There's usually also an abstract, so that text, this small piece of text, really summarizes, the problem, the thesis, and the arguments of the paper. Okay, so you have those elements, and then you have this subheading here, which marks the introduction. Okay, that comes before the introductory paragraphs. Let me show you. So the first and second pages, you can see here. So after the abstract, you have the introduction. And in some disciplines, the first paragraph is not indented. In philosophy, it usually is. I know that's a very small detail, but there are differences in paper presentation and presentation and formatting of the paper, depending on the field. Okay, so there's the subheading. There's the first paragraph where I have my hook, and I'm using the hook in order to set up the problem. So that's why I'm saying advocates or people who are for philosophizing with children and young people report the benefits of the practice. So I'm setting up the problem here. Okay, and then I continue eventually to ask my main problem, my main question, more specifically, which is whether it is desirable to teach philosophy in the second language or in a foreign language that's not the mother tongue, that's not the first language of your students. So, and my basic thesis is that yes, it is desirable. Okay, and that thesis is what I'm going to support in the rest of the paper. Like I said, you will use subheadings. I'm mentioning this because as I'm learning in my master's in history, historians don't like subheadings, but in philosophy, they're fine. You can use them. Okay. And then typically also philosophy doesn't use endnotes. In philosophy, it's usually footnotes. It can change. Some journals like endnotes, but in the Philippines, as far as I know, most people in philosophy, they use footnotes like this. Okay, I'll return to this to citation systems, but this is a citation system that's consistent with Chicago, the Chicago system or the Chicago style, or that is made famous in the Philippines by the book of Kate Arabian. So it's still available, it's been updated. So if you're really serious about doing research in philosophy, you can check that out. Kate Arabian. Okay. And then here you have the conclusion. As you can see, I have some numbered phrases or sentences there where I basically say, okay, this is what we saw. This is what I presented. I first presented 3 reasons that could support a negative response. So I'm just recapitulating, some of the arguments that I responded to, and then, I'm going to give a summary of my own arguments very briefly and in a different language, so it's still a little bit fresh, a little bit more interesting than simply copy pasting the phrases and the sentences that I already used in the previous parts of the paper. Okay. And then your research paper has to have a bibliography. Okay. So as you can see here, in giving you these examples of the different components of the paper, I'm going beyond the basics, introduction, body, conclusion. I'm also pointing out some of the other elements, especially elements that refer to the format or the formal requirements of a research paper. And this is an important one, actually, probably one of the most important parts of a research paper. You need to have a bibliography or a works cited page or section. Okay. You need to provide a list of all the sources that you used for this particular paper. I'll come back to this idea later on and explain why that's important. But the basic point is that you're not doing it alone. You're not doing research in a vacuum. You need the help of other people. So you need to enter a conversation, and these are your conversation partners. And you need to refer to them, at the end of your paper, so that the person who just read your paper, in case they're interested in pursuing the same problem, looking at other people who've dealt with a problem, they have a basic guide. Okay, so the bibliography or works cited section actually has a lot of uses, because it's not only a way for you to thank the people whose works you used. It's also a way for you to help your reader, join the conversation as well. By referring to other authors that are relevant to the question or the problem that you're dealing with. Now, maybe I'll just take a few moments to let that sink in. I'll just take a sip of my coffee. I will zoom in the page. Yes, pages. Thank you for that comment. Hopefully, maybe I'll go back and just give you another view of the different examples I gave. I'll just make them a little bit bigger. Again, this is the opening page. This is the introduction. I'll just do that slowly. And the second page, sorry. I think this paper is also available online if you're ever interested in the topic of philosophizing with children. This is the subheading and footnotes. This is the conclusion. And this is the works cited, the works that you used section. So as you can see, that's alphabetically arranged. And there's usually an indentation in the subsequent lines, the lines after the first one. That's I'm not sure, but I think that's quite specific to philosophy. Not all citation systems do that, but it really depends on what style you use. Okay. Now, let me return to whether there are no further comments. Now, before you start doing your research, what are the things that you need to do? What are the things that you need to keep in mind? Psychologists, researchers, and other people like writing coaches, writing teachers, even in literature, even in creative writing, a lot of people have said this already, and I think it's really important to take this seriously. Before embarking upon a research project, you really need to figure out for yourself, to really see for yourself what you're interested in, okay? What you're willing to work for. Because if you don't like the topic that you're working on, you'll probably give up. You won't get any enjoyment out of the experience. It's going to be burdensome. You will hate the experience. You might start hating philosophy. So if I were you, you really have to reflect on what is it, in the course, for instance, that you're taking. What topic, what question, what issue, which philosopher is really interesting for me. Okay? From your point of view. That's really crucial. You need to know, you need to have some degree of self-knowledge on that point. Okay? Otherwise, it's going to be such a burden, such a drudgery to conduct research. You won't like conducting research, and maybe after all of your efforts, you're just going to say, "I give up. I don't." Even if you finish, I don't want to do it anymore. I don't want to do it again. So if I were you, in order to be able to sustain yourself in philosophy and to sustain yourself in research, work on something that you really like. Okay? So think about writing about a question or a topic that's already familiar to you. Sometimes that's possible, sometimes you already have some knowledge. That will make your work easier if the topic, question, or philosopher is already somehow familiar, right? Now, if you are going to work on something new, that's also okay, but you have to be aware that you have to put in more effort, more work, more time, more energy into writing about something new to you. Okay, people have done that, other people have done that before, but it takes a longer time, more energy, more effort on the part of the researcher. Okay? So you have to be aware also of your other commitments. If you have other classes, if you have other obligations, so I suggest do something that's really interesting and already quite familiar, so that you know you can still fulfill your other commitments, your other obligations, if at all possible, to work on something that you already know. Otherwise, you'll have to put in the extra effort. Start reading about the topic even before you actually start writing. Start reading. It's always a good idea to read. Ask your professor for help. They're not your teachers. Your professors are not mind readers. If you don't ask for help, if you don't speak out, then you know you won't get the support that you might need. So ask your professors for help. Maybe they have leads. Also ask them about expectations. What kind of paper are they expecting? What kind of paper are they looking for? What do they want to see in the paper? So it's always good to be explicit about these things. Okay. I know that sometimes we're shy. We have hiya in Tagalog. But when you're talking about a research paper, when you're talking about a course requirement, it's better for you to really ask explicitly about your course or your teacher's expectations. Then, as you are reading, check bibliographies, works cited lists. You're reading research journals, you're reading books, you're looking for other sources, other texts that you can include in your research. Always take a look at the bibliography. They're very helpful because they'll give you an idea of what else to read. Okay? And then, this is also quite mundane, quite simple and ordinary, not very exciting, but you need to see for yourself whether you have access to resources. I'm sure a lot of you are resourceful. You have, you're probably more, because you're younger than us, you're probably more familiar with the internet, and you can track down sources easier than other people. It's good to be aware of what is available to you, what resources are within your reach. What are the resources in your library? What are the resources online? I'm telling you this because you cannot embark upon like a major research project without resources. So if you have limited resources, then you'll have to scale down your project. You cannot be too ambitious. I'm not saying that being ambitious is bad. I'm just saying that you have to be realistic. You only have a certain time frame within which you need to finish your work. You cannot read everything, and maybe not everything is available to you. Okay. So I'm really saying two things. One, check what is available to you, if they're accessible, and if they are, go for it. You know. On the other hand, if there are limitations, you have to be realistic about those limitations and take those limitations into account as you are about to embark upon your research project. Okay? And remember, it's always good to ask for help. Maybe you have contacts in other parts of the Philippines or in other parts of the world. Maybe they can help you to find certain articles, books that you need, it's always good to ask for help. Now, we're moving on to something a little bit more specific. Here, we're taking a look at certain components of a philosophy paper and how we should understand them. Okay, I'm going to try to explain to you what a research problem is, what a thesis, or in the sciences we call a hypothesis, is, what kind of support you need to provide for your thesis, for your main claim in the paper, and then what it means to draw conclusions. Okay, so if we're really talking about a research paper, these things need to be in there. They need to be clear. They need to be identifiable. Most specifically, your research problem and also your hypothesis or your thesis, your answer to that research problem. Okay? So here we're going to see some more philosophical examples. So what is a research problem? One way to understand what a research problem is to understand what it's not. Okay? So it's less, a research problem is less like a question. So it's not really like this, is what I'm saying. Okay? This is something that you can try to avoid. It's less, for instance, for example, what is the idea of God in Descartes? Okay? If you ask a research question like that, that's not completely bad, actually. But what you're trying to do here is not necessarily a research problem with an argument, but more like an exposition or a summary. Okay? So this particular question asks for mere exposition or a summary of an aspect of the French philosopher's philosophy. Okay? So answering this question, what is the idea of God in Descartes, may not require actual research yet, or at least not a very elaborate kind of research. Because what you actually need here is mere paraphrasing or rephrasing. That's what you need to do. Which, by the way, I have nothing against, answering a question like this and summarizing a philosopher, because summaries are useful in, let's say, if you're supposed to give a class presentation, if the requirement of your course, the course you're taking, is a summary or a simple report, or you're given a very short assignment, right? So this can still be useful. This can still meet the requirements of your course. But answering a question like this is something that secondary sources do. Introductory books, introductory essays to a particular philosopher. This is what they do. And, many of those commentaries or secondary sources, they're not necessarily works of research. They're more expository. They're more summaries, simpler presentations of philosophies or philosophers. Okay? So a research problem is less like that. It's also less like this. For instance, what did I personally learn in reading Descartes? In itself, the question is not bad. It's just that it's not a question for a research paper. It's a type of question that's useful in reflection papers, and sometimes your teachers might actually ask you to do something like this. Ask for your own personal view, for your own personal opinion, but this is not a research paper. Okay? So a research problem is more like this. For instance, how should we understand the idea of God in Descartes? Okay? How should we read that idea? Why is this more like a research problem in a research paper? Because this question, in order to respond to it, it requires argumentation and evidence. Okay, if you're going to respond to such a question, you have to come up with a thesis, and you need to come up with arguments and also support for your thesis and arguments. And so a research paper is more like this. Okay. So again, I hope this is useful. This is just a way of understanding how quite specific a research problem or a research question is. So a philosophical research problem or question is not any of these things. I give other examples of what it's not. Okay, it's not a direct, completely open philosophical question, as you can see here. That's the first one. So, for instance, you ask a question, a very philosophical one: what is the nature of God? Right? But this is the type of question that philosophers ask. Philosophers who write original works of philosophy, this is the type of question that they ask. This is a good question. It's very philosophical. It's very interesting, but it's not necessarily a research question, or at least not a very good one. Okay, it's completely open. You can go in different directions. Your research question has to be a little bit more specific than this, is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Secondly, a research question is not a real world problem, or it's not a real world question. So for instance, you're religious and you want to promote belief in God. So maybe your question is, how do I promote belief in God? Because you have a real world problem and this is your question. But a philosophical research question is not the same as a real world problem. And usually philosophical research questions don't solve any real world problems. Okay? Thirdly, it's not a literary craft problem. It's not a problem that you encounter if you're writing a story. For instance, as you can see, how does the main character become close to the one she loves? So if you're a writer, that's the problem you're trying to deal with in writing your story. There's a conflict. There's conflict like self versus other, or there's a problem. Okay, I love somebody, or I love God, but there are things that come in between us. So how do I develop a story out of that? But that's not research. Okay, it's an interesting literary problem, but it's not research. Also, it's not a history writing problem. Of course, we can argue about this because some people do the history of philosophy. So that can also be, you can also actually do research in the history of philosophy. But I just want to clarify that if you're talking about causes and consequences, you're more obviously within the realm of history. Okay. So for instance, what events caused Descartes to write about God? So you might not necessarily talk about his philosophy, his main arguments, his main ideas. Maybe you're talking about his life. So that can be a part of philosophy, but that's not really at the core of philosophy. Okay. And lastly, a philosophical research problem is not a scientific problem. And this might be completely obvious to you, but it's important to say it nonetheless. For instance, I'll just read the second example there, the second question. Can religious belief be explained in neuroscientific terms? Can you explain religious belief by looking at how the brain works? Okay. So now that's a real scientific question because the method you're going to use will have to be scientific. You'll have to use certain technologies. Okay, you'll have to do scientific research in order to be able to answer a question like that. Unlike in philosophy, where the research that we do is simply reading texts most of the time. Okay, so I hope that's clear. So these are what a philosophical research problem is not. Now, we come to a more explicit statement of what a research problem in philosophy is. A research problem is usually a question of how we should understand a philosophical idea. Okay? Or another way of phrasing that is, it's a question of how to read philosophical texts. Okay? Sometimes people who are looking at different ideas or sometimes different philosophers, what they do is to try to find the relationship between two ideas or two arguments or two texts of two different philosophers. Sometimes that happens. You can also do that. Or another way of saying this or explaining, excuse me, what the research problem is, you know, it's a question of what and how we should focus on and what we should think about as we are reading a text. Okay? So you're really making an argument. You see, if you take a look at the questions, at the statements here, how should you understand a philosophical idea? How should you understand a philosophical text? If you provide an answer to questions like this, you'll have to say, well, this philosophical idea should be understood in this way. So the key term there is should. That means that you are saying, this is my claim, this is what I'm saying. You can agree or disagree with me, right? So you have to provide argumentation in order to support this claim that this philosopher, this idea should be read, should be interpreted in this particular way. Okay? So you have a couple of examples there at the bottom of the slide. What is the relevance of the idea of God in Cartesian epistemology? So what is the place of that idea of God? How should we read that idea of God in Descartes' philosophy? Or another question, now referring to my all-time favorite philosopher, how should we understand the idea of the created ego in Levinas? So this is actually part of my earlier research in the Philippines and also in Belgium. You have this idea of the created ego. It's surprising that it's there, but it's actually there in totality and infinity. How should we understand that? Because Levinas says that he's a philosopher and he's not a religious thinker. Although of course he had a religious background because he was Jewish. So how do we interpret that idea that you find in totality and infinity, and which also appears in some form in his later work, Otherwise Than Being? Okay. So again, I hope that's clear. I hope that spells out for you what a research problem could be. So I think really in the end, a research problem in philosophy is a problem or a question that deals with how we should read or interpret an idea, a philosopher, a text. Okay? Now, what is a thesis? Again, this is one of the basics, but it's good to clarify this in our consciousness. A thesis is really just a sentence. It's a declarative statement. And as a statement, it can be true or false. So you can argue over it. Okay? If you say, just to give you a silly example, it's dark outside, there's no light outside. Somebody else might say, well, that's not true. Look, the sun is rising, so there's actually some light. Okay? So a thesis is really a statement that can either be true or false. And that statement is one possible answer to the research question or problem that you are trying to deal with. So there are other possible answers to the same question or problem. Okay? And such a claim, like we said before, has to be supported by evidence. Okay, so you need to consult other philosophers, you need to consult secondary sources in order to prove, prove in quotation marks, to demonstrate the truth of your thesis. Okay? So to give you an example, let me return to the previous slide. So here, what is the relevance of the idea of God in Cartesian epistemology? Or how should we understand the idea of God in Descartes? Okay? And you can say, for instance, in response to that particular research question, this can be your thesis. The idea of God in Descartes is best understood in light of his understanding of the cogito, okay, of the I think in his meditations. So this is just one example. Okay, so this is a response to that previous question that you saw on the previous slide. As you can see, you can argue about this claim. It's a claim, it's a declarative statement. You can agree or disagree with it. Another person might say, well, that's not really true. And so you can try to disprove this. Okay? Others can claim, for instance, like we said, God in Descartes is better understood on its own. The idea of God in Descartes, you shouldn't confuse it, for instance, with the cogito. You shouldn't link those two. I'm just giving you an example. Okay, I don't think that's possible, but somebody can disagree with my original thesis here. Okay, and say, well, you really have to try to understand that concept on its own rather than trying to make a connection between that idea and this other idea. Right? And then, because this is your claim, you need to find support for this claim in the writings of Descartes. So you need to take a look at, let's say, the Meditations on First Philosophy, maybe Discourse on Method, or maybe the letters of Descartes to other, important figures during his in his day. Okay, so if you're talking about support, like we said, you need primary texts written by established canonical philosophers, so people we consider to be, in general, we consider to be important in philosophy. Okay, usually there's broad agreement about these names. So like I said, maybe you should take a look at these works of Descartes, the Meditations and Discourse on Method. And, you need to figure out what are some of the parts of those texts, the primary texts, that support my claim. Okay? And then you also need secondary texts, like we said before, written by other practitioners, so-called lesser philosophers, teachers, researchers. So for instance, Cunningham's Cambridge Companion to Descartes, which contains a lot of different essays introducing the philosophy of Descartes. You can also take a look at JSTOR, other research databases, to find articles, journal articles, and essays that deal with more or less the same problem that you are discussing in your paper. So you need to figure out what have other researchers, other scholars, other experts already said about this question. Okay? So you need to find support for your thesis just to prove that it's actually true. So even if people try to argue against you, you have certain things to show that might convince them, okay, that what you're saying is actually true. And then you draw conclusions, okay? So if the relevant primary and secondary texts, if they support your thesis, then at the end of your paper, in the conclusion, like we said, because the conclusion is where you say, oh, I fulfilled my promise. Look, I made a promise, I carried it out, I did certain things to fulfill that promise, And in the conclusion, you're going to say, look, I actually did it. Okay, so you have to say that explicitly. So in the conclusion, you say, you see, this is what the problem was. This is my thesis. These are my arguments. And now you see that we can come to this conclusion. Okay. Now, if your answer to this question is a no, if the primary and secondary texts, they don't necessarily support your thesis, what do you do? Because we have to be honest, right? We're doing research. We're trying to figure out whether, our thesis, like what we feel is the right response to the research question. If we're being honest, if we discover that the primary and the secondary texts, they don't actually prove our thesis, so we have to accept that. So maybe if that happens, if the texts that we consulted, they don't necessarily support our position, then we can revise our thesis. So you don't necessarily give up, even though it might be hard, maybe it might be disheartening, discouraging, but you don't give up. So what you can do if you want to continue is you can revise your thesis. So instead of saying your main claim was, well, the idea of God in Descartes can be understood in reference to the cogito, and you find out because you read and you did your work that that's not necessarily the case, maybe you can say instead, so you change your thesis a little bit, you might say other concepts here. Other concepts are also necessary in understanding the idea of God in Descartes. Maybe there are some other concepts in his writings that are also relevant in order to be able to read properly, to interpret properly the idea of God in his work. Or you can say, and with a little bit more humility, maybe you can revise your thesis in this way. Maybe you say the idea of the cogito allows us to understand God only to a certain extent. But you can see that this new claim has a slightly different focus. Okay? And most of the time, I would say it's good to use this phrase only to a certain extent, to not speak in absolute terms. I think this gives you room to argue more, and to convince other people. If you hedge, if you make a statement that uses a kind of hedge, like gives you a little bit of room to argue, if you're not too absolutist in your thesis. Okay, I hope that sort of makes sense to you. So those are just revisions to your original thesis, because the texts did not bear out the truth of your original thesis. Let me scroll down a little bit so I can show you the other possibility. If your original thesis cannot be proven by reference to the primary and secondary texts, you can also abandon your thesis. You can start over and develop a new one. Okay? So, for instance, you can actually say something like this. The idea of God in Descartes cannot solely be understood in reference to the cogito. So, as you can see, this is a way of saving the work that you already did. It's just, giving it, it's pursuing another point of view in your research. Okay? Instead of arguing for, the idea of God should be understood in light of this other idea, you say simply the idea of God in Descartes cannot be understood completely only by reference to the cogito. So, so it's a different thesis. Or the idea of the cogito can best be understood in relation to the idea of God and Descartes. Maybe it's the other way around. Maybe you got it completely wrong in the beginning. So instead of understanding God in reference to the cogito, maybe it's the cogito that has to be understood in reference to God, right? So because research is a process, you can change along the way. You can change your problem, you can change your thesis, you can definitely change the conclusions that you thought you were going to arrive at. Okay, that's really up to you. And if you're honest, that's really up to the texts that you consider, that you read. Okay, if the evidence is not there, don't force it, is what I'm trying to say in the end. Okay, I'll take a pause there and see if there's anything in the chat. I hope that's still intelligible to you. I hope that you see the points I'm trying to make here. Let's make it a little bit bigger. Okay, I'll just take a few moments to let the things we've said sink in. Okay, I hope you're still with me. I cannot see you, but I hope you're still paying attention. You're still awake. You haven't fallen asleep. There you are. Okay, I need to reduce that a little bit in size. Let's continue. Now, we're moving away from the nuts and bolts, the different components of a research paper and the nature of those components. Now, I'm going to give you some tips regarding how to actually conduct research. These are some of the things that have worked for me in the past. Some of these things might work for you, others might not. So you have to also figure that out for yourself. You have to know yourself as a writer, as a researcher, and to see what works for you, what doesn't. But in general, I think some of these things are rather useful. First, if you like doing research or writing by hand, always have a dedicated notebook. Okay, a dedicated notebook that's only for research and writing. It doesn't have to be a special notebook. It can be just anything that you can get from a national bookstore or your local bookstore or your office supply store. Okay. If you prefer, I actually like writing by hand. But if you're really like what do they say? A digital native. You're so used to using your computer. If you have a laptop or a desktop at home, then I suggest that you create a zero draft in the beginning. What is a zero draft? It's really a Word document or a notepad file where you write down anything that comes to mind. Okay. I'm a big practitioner, a big fan of having a zero draft, just to note down random things that come to my mind, questions, any ideas that pop into my head at any moment. That's why I like having a notebook. Okay. So just to get your writing started, write a zero draft where you are completely free to write anything you want, but as much as possible, of course, you write things that are related to the research project that you are doing. Okay. Now, you've probably heard this advice already, but I really do recommend writing every day. If possible, as soon as you wake up, write first. What I do whenever I can is to write and read first in the morning. Okay, so if you're able to do that, that's a very good thing to do, to write regularly. Okay, because writing every day means thinking every day, and that's what we're supposed to be doing if we're doing philosophy. Okay, and writing every day, you have, if you're doing that, you have to realize, you have to accept the fact that not everything that you're writing down is gold. Okay, a lot of that will go to waste, will never be used. But the point here is that if you write every day, you're practicing every day, and you only get better at something if you practice. Okay, it's the same with writing, it's the same with philosophy. In order to be good at it, you have to do it constantly. Okay? And while you're writing, you have to be honest with yourself as well. You have to turn off distractions. Okay? It's easy to get distracted. You always have your smartphone, you always have your computer. There are many things that can take our attention away from the work that we're doing. We just have to accept that fact. It's just a fact of life, given the kind of time period we're living in. So think about rewarding yourself, whenever you're writing. Some people, what they do, after 20, 30 minutes of writing, then they promise themselves, okay, I'm going to eat a cookie, something like that. Or I'm going to watch 10 minutes of my favorite episode, or sorry, my favorite TV show, right? Some people do that. And sometimes you need to trick yourself into writing. What I mean by that is not to be dishonest with yourself, but really set the conditions that would allow you to write. Okay. So sometimes what I try to do is, in order to, so to speak, trick myself, I set an alarm. So I plan to write for 20 minutes. And then I sort of know that I have to write for 30 minutes. So I set an alarm for 20 minutes so that when I hear the alarm, I know, 20 minutes, they're done. So I only have 10 minutes left to write. So I look forward to, the end of that time period, that short time period. So that actually motivates me to write more. Okay. I just trick myself into writing. Okay. But in the end, the important point here is that you have to allow yourself to write. There will be many distractions. There will be like a lot of doubt that will be inside you, telling you, maybe not very explicitly, that you don't deserve to write, that you cannot write, that there are people out there who are better than you. You really have to tone all of those down, to shut them out. You really have to reduce self-doubt. You need to believe that you are worthy of writing. That sounds very pop psychology, but it really helps. So you try to reduce self-doubt, and you write, and you have to believe that you are capable of writing. Okay. Now, thirdly, decide on what to read. Like, don't read everything because you probably won't have time. So you need to come up with a plan. Make a list. It can be a physical list, like done by hand, or a digital list, which is easier to have and to use. Decide on what to read. Come up with a simple reading program as you are doing your research. Make a list. What are your priorities? What are the things that you absolutely need to read? And what are the other stuff that maybe you can read if you have the time, if you have the energy, but it's possible that you'll never get to them. So decide on what to read, come up with a plan, read regularly, and for your research, for your paper, or for your thesis, use a variety of sources. Use books, book chapters. One thing really that has helped me is this idea. I don't know if it sounds very basic and very obvious, but you don't need to read an entire book. Sometimes you just need to read a chapter, and that saves you a little bit of time. right? That sounds very silly when I say it out loud because it sounds so obvious. But, you know, if you do that, if you keep that in mind, then you can get on with research. So some books you read in their entirety, other books you only read one or two chapters. Rely on journal articles, use online sources, use offline sources. Sometimes you need to use a dictionary. So it's good to have a variety of sources because you want to show your reader that you did your homework, right? That you actually took into account everything that was possible for you to get your hands on. Okay, so come up with a reading list and then stick to the program as much as you can. And obviously, back up your files. It's the worst thing that can happen to you if you're writing a paper and then you lose all your files. Nowadays, it's so easy to do. Use Google Drive, you know, get another USB stick. You know, it almost goes without saying you need to back up your files. Okay. Just in case maybe your bag gets stolen, your laptop gets stolen, or your computer crashes. You never know. You know, many things can happen in life. And keep track of your notes. Okay. Some people still use index cards. I don't do that, but some people do. It's useful for some people. It keeps them organized. So if you're that sort of person, good for you, and you can keep on doing that. Other people, they just use digital, they just use app software and other digital material or anything that they find online. So in Word, I cannot go into detail about this, but as you can see here in the picture, there's actually a reference function in Word, so it's very easy. You can insert a footnote, or you see here, you can manage your sources. You can already type in the sources that you're using. You just need to type in some information, and you can select the style here. In this particular instance, it's not very big for you maybe, but it says Chicago. You can actually generate a works cited or a bibliography using Word. It's very easy. I don't do it myself, but I know people who do, and it's really quite useful. You can just play around with that to learn how to do that, and online there are so many tutorials, I'm sure. Okay, so that's just a very small tip. You probably already know about this, but those are ways to keep track of your notes, of your sources. Now, I'm just going to say a few things with regard to doing research in philosophy. I think it's important to realize these things if you haven't already. If these weren't very present in your consciousness as students. It's good to understand that you're contributing, if you're writing a research paper, you're contributing to a body of knowledge or to a body of understanding. So you're actually doing your part. Maybe your research paper, because it won't be that original, it's still original to a certain extent because you're the only one who can write that particular piece of paper or piece of research. But your paper won't necessarily advance knowledge. Okay, it won't necessarily really bring philosophical understanding forward. It might. Maybe you're such a good researcher, you did a lot of work, you really put a lot of time and energy in your paper, and maybe you make a breakthrough in philosophy. That's very hard to do, but some of us will be able to do that. Not me in particular, but maybe some of you will. But other people, we won't necessarily be advancing philosophy, but we are contributing to the maintenance of it or the spreading of philosophical knowledge or understanding simply by writing a paper. It means we keep philosophy alive. Okay, and that's very important because in today's world, we see that it's so easy to lose things. It's so easy to destroy things, you know. So if you're doing research, you're actually doing something that's very good. You're making sure the philosophy lives on and other people can benefit from it as well and can do it. Now, the other point I want to make is that if you're doing research, you're engaging in a long-running conversation. It's been happening for over 2,000 years, and you join the party. You're joining the conversation. That's very good. You're not alone. You're connecting with people who lived centuries ago. Isn't that an amazing thing? To be able to connect with them. They're no longer here on earth, but we're still speaking to them, having a conversation with them by way of their texts. So we can see that philosophy is really collaborative work. Okay? We have to rely on others. We never exist, we never operate in a vacuum. Okay? Even agreeing or disagreeing with other people, even disagreeing with other people, that's some kind of collaboration. That's some kind of cooperative work, even if we don't necessarily, see eye to eye on certain questions. Thus, it is important to thank other people. Thus, it is important not to plagiarize. Okay? I need to say it explicitly. I'm not accusing anyone, but I've seen it so many times among my students. They write a research paper and some of them will plagiarize. What is plagiarism? It's trying to pass off something that you did not write as your own. That's really a very bad thing to do. And I often describe plagiarism as very similar to trying to kill somebody in broad daylight, in public. Why? Because the nature of a research paper is that it has to be read by somebody else other than you. It's basically public. And so if you plagiarize, it's quite easy for anyone to detect that you just copied and you just cheated, right? So that's why I say it's like murdering somebody in public when there's so much light. It's daytime, so you're going to get caught, right? So please, I think the more positive way of understanding this is, I will use other people, other researchers, other philosophers, and so I have to thank them properly. So I need to cite them and I need to include their works in the bibliography or in the works cited section. Okay. So I need to do my work and I need to recognize the fact that I refer to them, I use their work as well. So I'm not doing this alone. Okay. And this is very important because I used to see this often in philosophy, classmates and students of mine trying to solve real world problems by using philosophy. I think that's very good. It's a very noble idea, but that doesn't always happen. Okay. Philosophical research won't solve real world problems. Most of them won't. Okay, I'm not saying that philosophy is not useful. It is very useful. It's useful in understanding problems, but not necessarily solving real world problems. Okay. The other way of thinking about this is that if you do your research properly, then you can avoid personal academic problems. I mean, your individual problems. Okay. And doing research properly can help you progress academically and professionally. So it's not useless, but don't confuse philosophical research with, dealing with problems in the real world. Those are two separate things. Sometimes they converge, sometimes philosophical thinking really does help. Okay. That can happen. But most of the time, you have to keep those two things separate. Research is research. Research is writing a paper, being in the library, and immersing yourself in the works and the writings of these philosophers and their commentators. Okay. And this is an important point, the last one on the slide. Philosophical research demands professionalism. So what I mean by this is that you have to really do your best, do your work. You need to try to form a habit of writing, of doing research. This will involve a lot of repetition, a lot of going back to the text that you wrote and revising it. It's a long process. You have to understand that it's a process. You probably won't get it right the first time. So you have to go over it over and over again. You need to revise it, review it. Okay. And make sure, because this is what professionalism demands, that, like I said, you do your work, you try to eliminate any kind of mistakes, spelling mistakes, grammatical mistakes. You have to make sure that everything, all the formal requirements, pagination, citation, everything is there. Do your work professionally, even if you're an amateur researcher. Okay. Most importantly, in this particular case, you have to follow citation conventions, at least one. Like I said before, the most widely used style is Chicago in the Philippines. The Chicago style of citing written work. Okay, you can find that in the book of Kate Turabian, which is also widely available. And if you are resourceful, excuse me, I'm sure you can find a copy online, even of, older editions of that work. And a lot of websites, if you go to Cambridge, to Oxford, or to any university, a lot of them provide, the basics of this particular style. And also, like I said before, just ask your teacher what they expect in terms of citation style. Okay. I'll take a brief pause there and see if there are comments. None so far, because we're moving on to another part of the presentation. Now we're really reaching the end. As you can see, maybe on the screen, we only have a few slides left. Okay. Now we're going to talk about how to get your paper published. So suppose you did your work, you wrote a paper for a course, you did it well, you got a good grade. Okay. Now you're thinking, maybe I can have it published. And that's a very good idea. That's basically what I did. Whenever I wrote a paper for a course, I did my very best, as far as I could. And I poured a lot of time and effort and energy into completing the paper. And so at the end of it, after submitting it and getting my grade, the option of having the paper published was open to me. So you can do that too. So if you really did the work and you polished your paper in such a way that it is really of a certain quality, the quality of your paper is high, you can also ask your professor for their opinion, by the way. I'm sure they're going to be honest with you. So have one or two course papers ready, and then take a look online, go to your library, look for journals, local and international, publications that publish essays in philosophy. Look at the themes that they deal with. What are their tendencies philosophically? Do they want to publish? Do they tend to publish contemporary, like essays on contemporary philosophers, or is it more medieval? Is it more modern? Take a look at their focus. Do they focus on aesthetics, on culture, on feminism, let's say, or environmental philosophy, you need to figure that out. So what does a journal do? What does it like to publish? Right? Take a look at several journals and then make a realistic list of target journals. What do I mean by realistic? By realistic, I mean attainable for you as a beginner. Okay? I know that sounds a little bit harsh, but you need to be realistic about the quality of your work and also the chances that you get. Because what you don't want to do is to set yourself up for failure. Okay? So what you want to be able to achieve is a small amount of success in the beginning. So what you can do as you're looking at journals is to make a list of journals that you want to aim for. Put at the very top of your list maybe a prestigious one, a journal that's very difficult to get into. Okay? Now, it's up to you whether you want to do this. You try to get into that journal, maybe you fail, but there's another journal on your list. So in second place, a journal that's more reachable. Okay, so make a list of 3, 4, 5 journals that you aim for. Aim for the very top. Maybe you fail, maybe you succeed. If you fail, if your paper doesn't get accepted, you aim for another one, and then if that doesn't work out, you aim for another one. Okay. For complete beginners, I suggest aiming for a local journal. The likelihood that you're going to be published is higher. Okay, that's just the way it goes. And then read a few articles in those journals that interest you. You know, get a feel for their style, their language, the way the essays are written. Look for the citation system that they use. You know, really get familiar with the journal so that you know what they're looking for, so that your chances of getting published become higher. Okay? Study the submission guidelines. Any decent journal has a page or a web page on their submission guidelines, and they make explicit everything that they're looking for. What is their format? What's the citation system that they use? How long should the paper be? Other requirements. Most journals look for an abstract. Some of them will ask you to write a biographical note right away and include that in your submission. So make sure that you know what you're getting into and study what the journal requires. Okay? And like I said before, be professional. Submit the best version of your paper, the very best. Okay, this means that it's polished. There are no mistakes, or if there's one or two, you know, they're quite minimal, they're quite minor. We don't always see everything, so it's always a good idea to ask another person to read our work before we submit it to our teachers or to a research journal. Okay, and then after submitting, once you've done your work, you've done your homework and your research about the journal, you studied the requirements, and then you submitted, okay, your paper will be subjected to what is called a double-blind review. What does that mean? By the way, take note that the process usually takes a lot of time. It takes months, sometimes even years, okay? So you really have to be open, you have to be patient, you have to have thick skin. You have to be ready for rejection because that typically happens. If that happens, don't let that get you down. You try again, or you make other decisions. Okay? You move on with your life. Don't cry over spilled milk. It's rejected, let's say, and then you move on, you try the next journal. But it depends. This is what can happen, okay? A double-blind review, by the way, that means that your paper will be sent to 2 reviewers. Usually they're university professors, they're researchers. In certain cases, they're doctoral students. It depends really on the journal, and it depends on the editor of the journal, but usually it's your paper subjected to a double-blind review, which really means that um, your paper will be sent to two reviewers. You're not going to know who they are. Or it's only later on, after you get the feedback, that you might know their names. The editor might reveal their names to you, and those two reviewers will take a look at your work and see whether it's worth publishing or not. Okay, so these are the things that can happen. If your work is very good, your work can be accepted without any revision. It rarely happens, but it can happen. Okay, I experienced that once. Without revision, it's ready for publication, it's good enough. Okay, and then the process is short. In a couple of months or within a month, you will see your paper in print or online. Very good. Congratulations if that happens to you. More likely, you'll get your paper back if it's a very good paper, but the reviewers will ask you to make minor revisions here, minor revs. Okay, that can also happen. Maybe they have a suggestion. Maybe they say, oh, why don't you take a look at this? Maybe you can change the wording here. Maybe you can make this argument a little bit stronger by rephrasing it. Minor revisions. Sometimes you can have your paper accepted, but the editor says, well, according to the reviewers, you missed this very important piece of work. You need to read it first, incorporate it into your paper, or maybe there's something wrong with your introduction, so you need to overhaul that. You need to change it completely. That can happen, right? The reviewers think that it's a good paper, it has a lot of potential, but it needs to be revised. Okay. So that will take time. So that's why I said you need to be patient. You have to be open to suggestions. You have to have thick skin. You cannot think like, oh, I'm the best in the world. I'm not going to accept any suggestions. I'm not going to listen to the reviewers or to the editor. Or you also cannot be like, oh, they didn't like my work. They asked me to do so many revisions. Oh, I feel like a failure. No, you cannot do that, right? If your paper is accepted, just do the work, and then maybe after some revision, it will appear in the journal. And sometimes, your paper gets rejected outright. Maybe you didn't do your homework. Maybe it's of a very bad quality. That can happen. Or maybe just because you submitted to the wrong journal, they don't publish papers on this topic or on this theme. Maybe you wrote about a medieval philosopher while they only publish papers on contemporary philosophers. So your paper is rejected outright. And sometimes you don't even get a response from the journal, just because they get so many submissions, so they don't have the time to respond to you. That can also happen. Sometimes it's rejected with comments and suggestions. Now, if this happens to you, like I said, don't lose hope, don't lose heart. Take it in stride, take the comments and suggestions seriously. Some of them are going to appear mean. Some of them are going to appear very harsh, but look at it as a learning process. You're new to research, maybe, so maybe you'll get something out of the comments that will improve your work for the next time that you try to submit or you try to write a paper. So that's why you have to be open. You have to have thick skin. Okay. Don't let the comments get you down. Don't let rejection get you down. It doesn't mean that you cannot write. Okay. It's a process. So sometimes you make mistakes. Sometimes you need to develop. Sometimes you need to do more work. Okay. So when you revise, you follow the suggestions, you do further research. You can go back to your professors and ask them, what do you think of this suggestion? What can I do to improve the paper? Now, if you're asked to do major revisions or your paper is rejected, now you have to be honest with yourself. I'm referring to the last point here. You have to know whether it's worth it or not. Do you have the time? Do you have the energy? Do you have the resources to continue this research project? Or do you have other commitments? And it's okay if you want to take your life in a different direction. Some of us will have time, will have resources, will have the energy, will have the ambition to continue with research. Some of us won't. So you have to be honest with yourself whether it's something that you want to continue doing. Okay? And it might not be the end of the world if your research career ends there. Maybe you're better at something else. Okay? Maybe you're a very good teacher in philosophy. You have the potential to become a very good teacher, but not a researcher. Or maybe you're very good in psychology or history, but maybe philosophy, when it comes to philosophy, you're a little bit weaker. We have to accept sometimes these facts about ourselves. Okay. I can give you a personal example. I've always liked literature, writing, but I'm not very good at picking up languages. I speak different languages, but I'm not very good at them. It's very hard for me to become fluent in a foreign language. Okay? That's just something that I had to accept as I grew older. So, I know that I'm not going to be a linguist. I know that I'm not going to be like very fluent, let's say, in the foreign languages that I speak. That's just a fact. Now, I have this book recommendation. When I was writing my dissertation, my PhD dissertation, at a certain moment I got stuck and I discovered this book by Joan Balker, Write Your Dissertation in 15 Minutes a Day. And it's really such an inspiring and useful book. If you ever find that you're stuck, you don't know how to proceed, you need a bit of encouragement, I suggest that you look for this book and read it. Okay? Few books have really helped me in doing research. Apart from this one. Now, we're really approaching the end. I'm sorry if I went over time. These are just some suggestions. If you're really serious about research, you can take a look at some of these well-established journals in the Philippines. By the way, if you have access to this PowerPoint, you can go to this slide and you can actually click on that, on the names, and they will take you to the website. So it might be useful for some of you. Excuse me. So you have Budhi, published by Ateneo. You have Critique, that's organized, that's run by the great people. I know some of them at the University of Santo Tomas. There's also an undergraduate journal of philosophy. I've never seen an issue of Talisik, but it's, I suppose the same people, or more or less the same people, the same professors and students are behind this. As with Critique, they're doing some great work over there at UST, at the University of Santo Tomas. Philosophia, one of the journals, one of the first journals that accepted some of my papers. So it's also based in the Philippines, but they publish internationally as well. You can find this online. This is one that is great because it's based in the Visayas and Mindanao, the Favis Minda Journal. I don't know if they're still active. I've never published there, but as I was preparing this lecture, I found a website that referred to some of their issues. And Tambara as well. It's not a philosophy journal. It's more like a publication put out by Ateneo de Davao University. They publish different sorts of essays, of articles, but they also accept philosophy, like philosophy or philosophy oriented articles there. I know because I've also published in Tambara. So you can try that out as well if you want. So what we saw in this talk or lecture, so we talked about what a research paper is. We went into the different parts of a paper. Um, we also discussed what to do prior to doing your research and writing. And the most important thing that I want to emphasize here is that you need to know yourself, you need to know your topic, you need to be really interested in the topic, and you need to know how much work you're willing to put in. We talked about specific components of a paper, like what a research problem is, which we said was a problem of interpretation, a problem of reading, what a thesis is, how to formulate a thesis, what it means to find support for your thesis, and eventually, you know, what to do with the conclusion or in the conclusion. Then we talked about the process of conducting research, that it's advisable that you write regularly, that you have a scheduled time to write, that you set aside, an hour or two every day, or maybe a few hours in a week, and that you need to be professional about your writing, about your research. Then, towards the end of the lecture, we touched upon the publication process, and the most important thing that we want to underline here is that you need to know your journal, your target journals, and you need to know your audience. You need to know what they're looking for and what are the requirements that you need to meet in order for your paper to appear in your targeted journal. Okay? So I hope that was very clear. And I think it's time for me to, at the very least, take a pause and to let you ask your questions or make your comments if you have any. I'd be happy to address them. Thanks for listening to that very long lecture. Thanks for your patience.
Wow, that was such an insightful and enlightening session we had with Dr. Capili. We are just very fortunate that we got to have the chance to learn from a great mind such as his. Thank you so much, Dr. Capili, for your time and for enlightening us with your insightful knowledge.
I bet that our students here have learned a lot from Dr. Capili, especially regarding the construction or the making of philosophical research. And because of that, we'd like to hear from our dear students as we give the floor to Ma'am Casey Alcazar for our open forum. A virtual round of applause, please.
Thank you, Eric. So indeed, we heard a very insightful presentation from Dr. Kapili. So we've heard some very excellent tips and strategies, and we hope to keep track of all of them. At this point, we will open the floor for questions. Please write them in the comment section. And whether you're writing your first research paper or refining a draft, this is a great chance to share your experience or seek advice. So please don't hesitate to ask questions or share your experiences, again, by writing on the comment box. So we have had questions here already, sir, and I will be reading them from Eric Frost Lensher. Good day, sir. I have noticed that the perspective or the pronouns used in your research is I and we. Based on other research papers, they often use this paper or the researcher. My question is, when do we use I and this research in my paper? Thank you. So would you like to answer, sir?
Yeah, that's a very good question actually. In philosophy, we tend to be a little bit more impersonal. So we do say this, your observation is correct. In philosophy, we tend to say we, or we tend to say this paper, this research, you know. I don't think this has changed radically in the last 10, 20 years. So I would still go for this paper, this research, rather than say I. Um, in certain other disciplines like history or like literature, it's acceptable to use I, but in philosophy, it tends to be a little bit more formal. So we say this researcher, this research, this paper. But again, I come back to a comment I made before in the presentation. Take a look at the journal that you're targeting, that you want to be published in, and see the kind of language that they use. Because there might be journals out there, more contemporary ones, more, I don't know if you can say that, more progressive ones, and maybe they have looser rules about this. But in general, I think it's safer to use this paper, this researcher, or sometimes we think, or we have seen, at least in my practice, in my own individual research. That's what I have done. So thanks for the question. It's very good.
Thank you, sir. So I hope that is answered already. So go back to the language that the publication speaks. Okay, so another question, sir. Good morning, sir. From Zaraki Kenpachi. Good morning, sir. How can you simplify the process of writing an abstract? Any advice?
Um, that's also very good. You have great questions. Thank you. A lot of people, they just copy paste. To be honest, they just copy paste the most important parts of their paper. I wouldn't necessarily recommend that. What I would say is to take a look at your conclusion, because your conclusion is already a kind of abstract. Because in the conclusion, you present the problem again, your thesis, and then also the arguments that you make. Okay. So you can rely on your conclusion, just say it slightly differently so that it doesn't look like you just copy pasted. You always want to give the impression that some work, some reflection, some thought went into the process of writing the parts of your paper. Okay. Um, Another thing that you can do as a practice, I learned this from one of my teachers in Ateneo, is in general in writing, to make sure that you really understand what you're talking about, is maybe after you review your paper, the entirety of your paper, and you're about to write an abstract, just put your paper away, don't look at it, and try to free write, like just write down what you really want to say, and try to limit yourself to a few lines or one short paragraph, so that what you create is fresh. And after a while, you can come back to your paper, take a look at your introduction, take a look at your conclusion, and see if what you actually wrote down, what you drafted, corresponds to what you actually say in the paper. So that process might be useful for some people as well. But again, I come back to um, my first tip, which is review your paper, most likely either the introduction or the conclusion, and then select the most important parts of your paper, and then write them down in a very short paragraph or in a few lines. And most likely you have your abstract. But remember that in your abstract, you really have to clarify your research problem, your thesis, and give a hint of the steps that you're going to take, but don't give away the conclusion. Okay, so don't reveal everything in the abstract, because you want to attract the reader. A lot of readers, a lot of researchers, to save time, they only read the abstracts of journal articles to see whether they're relevant to what they're doing or not, whether they're interesting or not. So you need to make sure that the abstract is very interesting. Okay, so don't give everything away, otherwise nobody will read your paper. Thanks.
Any other question from the participants? I cannot see more questions, sir, but there are words of thanks. So while waiting for comments or questions, thank you, Dr. Capili from Ruben Balutol Jr. From Zaraki Kintachi, greatly admire your presentation, Doc. Karil Redoble. Thank you for that lecture, Dr. Capil. From Athena Aurelia, thank you, sir. We highly appreciate. From Eric Frost Lencher, thank you so much for your response, sir. Thank you so much for your presentation, Dr. Capili from Athena Aurelia. Last question, sir, from Eric Frost Lencher.
Sure.
Is the structure of a philosophical paper fluid or does it have a formal structure such as chapter 1 to 5?
Okay. A philosophical paper usually it doesn't have chapters because it's shorter. You're probably talking about, I don't know if you can visualize this. It depends on the journal, but you're probably talking about 4,000, 6,000, maybe maximum 10,000 words. So it won't necessarily have chapters. You will have different sections. You can have them. And like I showed you in the presentation, you can have subheadings. And so it's semi-fluid. It's not as fluid, let's say, as a history paper. But it's a little bit more fluid than a formal thesis, like a longer thesis that might be 15,000, 20,000 words. That might be, let's say, 60, 70 pages. At least in Belgium, that's the standard. Excuse me. About 60 to 70 pages for a master's degree paper, and maybe about 50 pages for an undergraduate paper. So if you're, sorry, thesis. So if you're talking about thesis, then you really have to, it's very formal. It's divided into chapters, and those chapters need to be clear. But because a paper is just one essay, it doesn't necessarily have chapters, but it can have different sections and headings and subheadings. So it reads more fluidly if that's what you're asking about. But it's okay to divide the sections of your paper into smaller sections, especially if your focus changes from part to part. Thanks for the question.
Again, sir. Thank you, sir. We really appreciate hearing from you from the one who asked the question, from Eric Frost Leshner. Okay, so are there any more questions? Last call for questions. So I don't think there are none. Thank you so much, Dr. Capili. I'll hand over the floor to our MCs now. Eric and Lee.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, everyone, for your participation and your insightful questions. We also would like to thank Sir Capili and Dr. Capili for answering those questions. It really helped us understand further the topics regarding our research paper, especially philosophical research paper. As we come closer towards the end of the first part of our activity, we hope that we take this knowledge as we continue with our endeavors in life, especially in our academic endeavors, going forward with our studies.
But before we end, partner, let us first appreciate our guest speakers as we give him this certificate of recognition. Requesting the presence of Sir James for the reading of the certificate. A virtual round of applause, please.
In the meantime, I really appreciate the design of the certificate. Thanks so much. It's beautiful.
Ye- yes, sir. Yes, sir. We're just trying to fix Sir James' audio, sir.
No
We
problem.
have we have to read it because it's beautifully made for you.
Yeah, I can see that. I appreciate it. It's great. I like the patterns, really.
All right, sir.
Am I audible? Yeah. Hello, Dr. Capili. Thank you so much for your appreciation with our certificate. um, without at this juncture, may I read to you the citation? Bukidnon State University, College of Arts and Sciences, Philosophy Department. Certificate of recognition is awarded to Dr. April Capili for being the resource speaker during the International Philosophy Conference on Philosophy Research and Publication and Teaching Philosophy at Bukidnon State University. Given this 11th day of September in the year of our Lord 2024 at Bukidnon State University, Malaybalay City, Bukidnon, Philippines. Signed, Dr. Joy M. Mirasol, University President. Sir?
Thank you so much. Like I said, I appreciate it. Thanks for inviting me. It was a great pleasure and honor to be with you today. I hope, I really do hope that you got something out of the presentation. And this event is something that I'll remember for a long time. And like I said, I want to repeat it just to emphasize that it's a great certificate. Thanks to the university and all the organizers, and for Sir Jofer for inviting me. Really, it was great interacting with all of you. Thank you.
All right, sir. For now, sir, we'd like to request you to remain because from our end, we would like to have a picture taking of you. And while we are doing this picture taking here, we would like you to be a part of this picture. Okay, sir?
Sure.
Ay, sorry. I was saying that that's it. We took our pictures, from here where we are staying, and would like to thank you again, and have a great day, sir.
Thank you. So enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank
All
you.
right. Thank you,
Bye
sir.
bye.
Okay, so thank you everyone for your participation and your insightful questions. We also thank Sir James for the giving of certificate as well as Dr. Capili. Let's give another virtual round of applause to our guest speaker, April Capili. As we come to an end to the first part of this activity, we would like to thank all of you for tuning in this session. Your presence has truly made this activity a success.
But it's not over yet. We still have another session waiting for us this afternoon. Stay tuned and please be with us later at 12:45 p.m. for another insightful session from our second guest speaker, Dr. William Wolf Diricht.
Don't miss out on the knowledge, and we'll see you later. I am Eric Rowan Galado.
And I am Lady Crisbel Balisi, your Masters of Ceremony. Thank you and enjoy your lunch.